Imagine this. You are sitting at your desk. Outside, the world hums with life. Cars passing, people laughing, clocks ticking toward their inevitable futures. Inside, however, something quietly seethes, a simmer beneath the surface. Not loud, not violent, just persistent. You clench your jaw without realizing. Your shoulders are tight. Someone's offhand comment from earlier loops in your mind like a broken record. Why do you always overreact? You didn't overreact, did you? No, you were firm, clear. And yet, that familiar burn lingers. Anger. You were taught not to show it, not to feed it. Anger, after all, is dangerous, destructive, ugly. It ruins relationships, poisons minds, makes beasts of otherwise decent people. That's what they told you. So, like everyone else, you learned the ritual. Swallow it down. Bury it deep. Put on the smile. Numb yourself with distractions. Convince yourself you are above such petty emotions. Society gave you a script, and you followed it, word for word. But here's the paradox, the unsettling contradiction. No one dares speak aloud. The more you suppress your anger, the more it defines you. Not openly, no. On the surface, you become agreeable, controlled, perhaps even pleasant. But beneath, it festers. It molds your inner narrative in shadows. It leaks in passive aggression. It twists itself into anxiety, depression, self-loathing. You become polite and hollow, peaceful and powerless. Is this really what mastery looks like? Is transcendence just emotional anesthesia? Imagine carrying this weight every single day. You push through meetings, you smile at loved ones, you pursue your goals, and yet, anger quietly governs your boundaries, your fears, your desires. It becomes the silent architect of your existence. And yet, there is something even more disturbing. Despite everything society taught you, anger knows. It knows when you've been mistreated. It knows when you've betrayed yourself to avoid conflict. It knows when you're playing small just to please others. It whispers, in moments of quiet injustice, this is not right. What if anger is not your enemy, but your neglected guide? What if anger, untamed, misunderstood, points directly to where you've compromised too much? Throughout history, every revolution, every movement toward justice, every personal breakthrough, they did not emerge from complacency. They emerged from anger. Anger dared to say, no more. It propelled the oppressed to rise. It told the disempowered, you deserve better. So why does modern life demand its silence? Perhaps denying anger is not virtue. Perhaps it is fear. Perhaps anger left unacknowledged is the ghost that haunts our inner worlds, a phantom whispering at the edges of our lives. This is where the journey truly begins. Imagine sitting quietly at a family dinner. Conversation is light, trivial, but beneath your smile, there's a quiet scream. You laugh when required. You nod politely. You endure. But endurance is not peace. Suppressed anger doesn't dissolve. It mutates. Carl Jung warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Anger, buried deep, mutates into subtle roles. The people pleaser, the martyr, the passive victim. By rejecting anger, you reject the part of you that dares to say no. Boundaries soften. Self-respect erodes. Compliance replaces authenticity. But there is a price. Modern psychology makes this clear. Studies link repressed anger to depression, autoimmune issues, anxiety. Anger turned inward corrodes from within. Philosophers saw this coming long before psychology put it into words. Nietzsche warned, suppressed anger becomes resentment, poison that breeds envy and bitterness. Society thrives on this compliance. Arthur Schopenhauer taught, anger is the natural voice of will. When silenced, you become docile. Aldous Huxley revealed, anger, numbed by distractions, makes citizens easy to control. Jean-Paul Sartre argued, freedom demands discomfort. To suppress anger is to surrender agency. And Viktor Frankl, facing unimaginable cruelty, honored anger as sacred. It was to him the force that whispers, I matter. And so, daily, you negotiate with yourself. It's not worth it. I should be grateful. But these are not insights. They are betrayals. Anger unacknowledged becomes your master. It shapes compromises. It builds quiet resentments. It rewrites desire as silent suffering. And so, the stage is set. You hesitate to ask for what you need, not because you're weak, not because you lack vision, but because a quiet voice in your head, one trained by culture, by fear, by habit, whispers, don't cause trouble, don't be dramatic, don't be too much. And so you adjust. You smile when it hurts, you nod when you should speak, you shrink. Not because you want less, but because somewhere along the way, boldness began to feel dangerous. This is how it begins. Not with an explosion, but with a retreat. Passions dim. Conversations flatten. You edit yourself out of your own life until all that remains is a version of you that feels acceptable. But at what cost? What have you stopped reaching for? Not because you didn't want it, but because you were afraid of your own power. But it doesn't end there. We live in a world that rewards quiet suffering. You're applauded for your politeness, celebrated for your agreeableness, promoted for how well you avoid rocking the boat. Compliance becomes currency. You're seen as stable, but inside, you're dissolving. You play the role perfectly, even as your identity blurs behind the script. And the most insidious part? You're thanked for it. Your ability to suppress your anger becomes your value, but it also becomes your cage. You laugh when they dismiss you. You nod when they interrupt you. You say, it's fine, when it's not. And every time you do, you drift further from yourself. When was the last time your silence was praised, but your truth was ignored? And here's what your body knows. Anger doesn't vanish. It reroutes. Suppressed anger turns inward, and the cost is physical. Fatigue, chronic illness, muscle tension, autoimmune conditions. The body becomes the battlefield for every no you were never allowed to speak. Gabor Mate writes, when we repress our anger, we're repressing our authenticity. This isn't emotional weakness. It's biological honesty. You aren't broken. You're just tired of abandoning yourself. And anger, still waiting, still loyal, is the only part of you that refuses to forget. Where is your body still holding on to a truth your voice has never spoken? To reclaim yourself, rebellion is no longer optional. It is essential. You are here now, on the threshold. Rebellion begins with permission. Permission to feel anger, without shame, to witness it, to allow it. Because when anger is seen with presence, it transforms. It becomes reclamation. Jung called this integrating the shadow. Nietzsche called it transmuting anger into will. Schopenhauer saw it as life refusing to stagnate. Frankl knew it as the freedom that lives in choice. So, what does rebellion really look like? It begins in the smallest, quietest moments, the ones you once ignored. Rebellion is naming tolerated injustices, not only in the world, but in your own life. It's the refusal to let small betrayals pass unnoticed. When your voice is dismissed, when your worth is downplayed, when your needs are treated as optional. It's daring to say what no one else will say. This is not right. Rebellion is also choosing discomfort over numbness. To feel anger, truly feel it, is uncomfortable. But avoidance? That's hollow. That is trading your aliveness for false peace. And rebellion is setting boundaries that honor your soul. Not boundaries made from rage, but from clarity. Boundaries that say, I will no longer abandon myself to make you comfortable. This is rebellion. Not against the world, but against your conditioned self. When you stop abandoning yourself, anger matures. It stops being chaotic. It becomes clear. It becomes action. It becomes fierce love. The world fears the integrated you, but through rebellion, a new self is born. Anger becomes your hearth fire, steady, powerful, and life-giving. You stand now at the edge of revelation, not because everything outside has changed, but because finally, something inside is willing to see clearly. In the stillness, anger rises again, but this time, it isn't chaos. It isn't loud. It's present. It leans in, not to shout, but to whisper, you abandoned yourself. And suddenly, the emotion you feel isn't rage, it's grief. Grief for every time you said, I'm fine, when you were breaking. Grief for every time you smiled to survive. Grief for every time your soul whispered no, but your lips said yes. This is what anger has always known. It stayed loyal, even as you betrayed yourself again and again. It wasn't there to burn bridges. It was there to keep the fire on. In case you ever came home, to meet anger fully is to meet grief. And beneath that grief is not weakness, but truth. You begin to see the cost of silence. You begin to see that your suffering wasn't senseless. It was a signal. Every outburst you feared, every tension you ignored, every low hum of unease wasn't a flaw in your character. It was the compass misfiring in the dark. You were never supposed to feel nothing. You were supposed to feel everything, so you could finally listen. When was the last time you mistook your silence for strength? This is the point where most people try to fix anger, to tame it, to label it, to silence it again under a more enlightened disguise. But anger doesn't need to be managed. It needs to be met. You don't lock it away. You don't let it drive. You invite it to walk beside you. It becomes clarity, a signal of what you will no longer tolerate. It becomes presence, a refusal to abandon yourself again. It becomes fierce compassion, not chaotic love, but love that protects. This is the integrated self, no longer torn between repression and eruption, just aligned, just awake, just whole. Which part of you have you spent a lifetime trying to quiet, only to discover it was trying to protect you all along? And then anger whispers again. Only now you don't flinch, you don't fear it. You ask, what truth do you reveal? And you listen, you act, not in rage, not in suppression, but in radical alignment with your deepest truth. And suddenly, you realize anger was never your prison. It was your invitation home.